الرحمن الرحيم اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما. Fiqh comes from understanding. It's not just a list of do's and don'ts. It's about recognizing where and how to apply the right set of rulings to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So first, some use cases for this course and what this course is and is not. Imagine if you're looking for everyday matters like how to make wudu, you can easily find them. You probably already know because you have read books, or you can ask your local scholar. And if you're grappling with a complex, controversial issue like cryptocurrency, for example, where scholars differ, your best approach is to consult a knowledgeable scholar you trust in their character and, of course, in their knowledge. And then someone who's expert in financial and commercial fiqh, for example, and you can follow their lead. But now imagine you have a deeper curiosity about fiqh. Maybe you're a student who frequently encounters people questioning the relevance of Islamic law to today's world. Or you're a professional like a real estate agent wondering how scholarly differences arise. Or perhaps you're a law student intrigued by how Islamic law functions and how it compares and contrasts with the common law, for example. So, or you're a researcher trying to find the right source for your thesis, or a seminary teacher or student, then this course can help you. So here I have made a quick flow chart. So I hope you guys can see. So imagine if you are, let's start with the beginner. If you're a beginner or amateur, like you are reading fiqh as a hobby, so take this course like a fiqh library tour. And what's the purpose, or what would be the benefit of taking this course? So you can appreciate the development and evolution of fiqh, because then you take fiqh as a science and not just a bunch of arbitrary opinions. And also, so you can appreciate, because you'll be introduced to different processes and the lawmaking process. So you can appreciate that, how different, like the kind of deep work that goes into formulating any opinion. And then you can also appreciate the effort of jurists who actually dedicated their entire lives for the sake of this deen. And one benefit of this appreciation will be that you will be convinced yourself, and also you will be able to convince others and dispel doubts, and you can be motivated to learn more. Now imagine you are not a beginner, you have already had some kind of understanding of fiqh, you have been studying fiqh for maybe a couple of years, then this course will act like a refresher and like a framework. So for example, what would be the benefit of this course? These are some things that, of course, we have the course outlines that we are going to go into. So after this course will help you put a name to concepts. So many times we hear words being thrown around like furu, usul. What do they actually mean? How do they actually look on the paper? So you will be able to, and that's why I wrote the other box, this one, you'll be able to put a face or page to the concept. This is something that I think that older students, like from the previous generation, like myself, we missed it a lot, because in our time, internet was not that common, and we had to literally go into a library and open a book. Now you can make presentations, and you can actually save, take screenshots easily. So it's a very streamlined process for learning fiqh, and we should benefit from it as much as we can. And of course, if you learn something by just listening to it as a theory, it doesn't stick to your mind. But when you see the page and you kind of have the photographic memory, that's easier to retain. Another benefit is that this course will teach you to study systematically. So what do I mean by that is, for example, background before breakdown. What happens, this is another weakness that I found in myself, that when I studied fiqh, And maybe because I was in my early teens, like 13, 14, when I studied reading Quduri, for example, I had no idea. I just knew that Quduri was a book, and it's a very, very good book, and that scholars have been reading this book, and this book has been popular for centuries. Now, where do I place this book? What's the position or the ranking of this book among the other books in the landscape of fiqh? How many different kinds of books are out there? I had no idea. And to be honest, when I started fiqh, and I wasn't very I wasn't very impressed, and actually kind of disappointed, because it just gives you something, but you often feel that something is missing. It's because the genre is not supposed to give you the things that you expected. So you should have the right expectation from any book. And of course, when you have the entire picture of all the genres, then you can pinpoint to the book that will answer your questions. So this is the methodology, or like the process, that I think it's important. Whenever we approach a book, we should be, instead of jumping into the book and zooming in, we should zoom out first, because having the background and placing the book in the right place helps a lot. Also, this course attempts to help you record systematically. As you can see, the template that I have provided in the course description, it's like a fill in the word. It saves your time like 10x. If you read a book and you just have the template, and you're making notes on your Google Docs or Obsidian or whatever another note-taking app that you have, you can just copy paste the whole template, and next time it will help you sort through it, and also for easy retrieval. We can also, I'm using Obsidian here, and there are tools to actually make it systemized in such a way that you can just type in, for example, if you like one genre and you are looking for particular methodology, basically searched it with advanced filter, but that's something uh, not related. Anyway, so another thing, to research efficiently, another benefit of this course. So for example, LLMs is language models like ChatGPT, or we should benefit from them as much as we can, but of course they are in a very formative stage, and they are not fully developed, not even like they can easily misguide you. But still, if you want to give them a prompt, or even if you want to ask a scholar, for example, now imagine that I'm asking someone, could you please suggest a book that compares and contrasts cases that are similar in appearance but different in ruling? Now you see the length of my inquiry. It's so long, and it's not precise. Now compare this question to this. Could you please suggest me a book from Furuq, a Hanafi book in Furuq? So now the person who is answering your query, they will know that you have done your preliminary research, and they will give you a more nuanced and better answer. They might give you a couple options. Basically, you know the precise terms to use when searching. And also, what I hope to achieve from this course, it will give you a head start through genre examples. So I have already given you one example from each genre, and I hope that you can build upon it. And how do you build upon it? So for example, let me just zoom out. I have here collected approximately, I think, 11, 12 books. So you can compare the methodologies, one from each genre. So what happens if, for example, you like a particular genre, let's say this one, you like this genre, which is the ilm al-khilaf, right? So now you have one book in the genre. But what if you want to build upon it? You want to know more books in the same genre. So it's easy. You go to the muqaddimah, you go to the preface, And then you can, because often in preface, they mention the preceding works, and sometimes the critical editions of that book, the later publications, they also mention the following works. So basically, the preface is your key to unlock the entire genre. So I have given you one example of each genre, and you can then build upon it, inshallah. Okay, just a quick disclaimer. This course is not an invitation for ifta. Ifta meaning that even formulating an opinion by just reading a book, it's not teaching you that. And also, it's not supposed to trigger confidence in you. If anything, it's supposed to give you confidence in the effort and the hard work and the brilliance of the jurists that actually dedicated their lives to it. So always consult the scholars. One inspiration of this course came from Shamila. So, Shamila is one of the biggest libraries of classical texts. But if you go to Shamila, you can see approximately 40 plus genres in here, spanning, like starting from Aqidah and going all the way down. So out of these 40 genres, they have fiqh. They have, of course, classified fiqh, given fiqh Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali. So that's neat. But when you go to fiqh Hanafi, they have a list of books. It doesn't give you a clue what book is based on what. There is no explanation. There is no short description, for example. Sometimes the titles are self-descriptive. For example, āruḍ ala siyar al-Awza'i. But many times the titles are not descriptive. Similarly, if you go to usul al-fiqh, here, this is the window. When you open usul al-fiqh, you see a full list of books, but it's not categorized in terms of genre. So, of course, we are just learning, and inshallah, I hope that those of you who are students, you guys can build upon it, and taking from the genre, we can make a comprehensive catalog. I actually researched into Harvard libraries and other libraries and I looked into their research guides, but I couldn't find a list of genres or something that could help me navigate this landscape of fiqh discourse. So that was just an example. Any question about this or about what we spoke earlier? Okay, so I just want to go over the course description. It's a template, your compass for navigating Islamic texts. Course intro, nothing here. It's beta because I'm still adding a couple things. For example, in the methodology and the genre one, I added taqneen because taqneen wasn't mentioned in here. Think about that. If you just look at the course learning outcomes, you see that most of the verbs that I have listed here, they are introductory. So it's like an orientation course. It's not a specialization course. It's giving you how to zoom out, how to find patterns, and how to make sense of the vast landscape of fiqh. Course outline, again, don't be intimidated if you don't understand anything. So this is what we are going to focus now. Lesson 1, understanding fiqh genres. Why I have mentioned the development of Hanafi jurisprudence under the fiqh genres, because when I was preparing this outline, I realized that many times there were many fundamental concepts about the development of Hanafi fiqh that I heard and that I understood it theoretically, but I couldn't put a page to that name, meaning that I didn't have any idea what that actually meant, how that translated onto text. And because we are studying text, we have to have a very clear picture of how to identify and classify texts. So here is the template. Basically, this is our compass, this template. The first 2, 3, 4 questions are easy. Now we are going to straight dive into the genre question or the genre metric. So as you can see, we have fiqh and we have usul al-fiqh. Most of these, they are duplicates here. So just like we have concise texts here, we have concise texts under the usul al-fiqh genre. One thing that I have noticed, it's not mutually exclusive, meaning that sometimes one book can be classified under two. Also, you might ask, what is the basis on which I have curated this list of genres? So as I mentioned, I couldn't find any book or any author who had classified books according to genre. I mean, very specifically, some of them they did mention some tabaqat of books, but again, they were the taxonomy of books in terms of their authoritativeness, sometimes in terms of chronology, and sometimes in terms of the authors, or sometimes in terms of the topic, for example, like in mu'amalat or in nikah or in topic wise. So I couldn't find scholarly analysis on something, for example, that includes all of these genres, especially, for example, this genre, reconciling conflicting evidence and determining preponderance. This is not a separate genre because sometimes you are doing it as part of the Jadl or as part of the ikhtilaf genre. And that's why I said they are not mutually exclusive, but at least you should have some idea where you can find what. Also, it's important to note that we need to differentiate between the primary and secondary purpose of a book. Just because a book is dealing with maxims, qawaid, or ilm al-khilaf, dispute science, passingly or as part of the larger debate, doesn't mean the book is dedicated to it or can be rightly classified under that genre. Furuq is a very wonderful genre. It's also called al-ashbah wal-nadha'ir. So furuq in Maliki, we call it furuq, and in ashbah, in the Hanafi, the term al-ashbah wal-nadha'ir is more common. And maqasid al-sharia is, of course, a bit more contemporary, and then we have simplified fiqh, and you can see the genres I do. So before we dive into the individual genre, I would like to walk you through this visual. So just a quick orientation. These numbers, they refer to the Hijri century. The boxes that I have made roughly, like 2 to 3rd century, they refer to the stage of Hanafi fiqh development. So this is one stage, and this another box is another stage. And these are century labels, and they refer to the defining characteristic of Hanafi works of that century. And here I should mention these clarifications. So stages overlap, not concrete, of course, just like with any evolution. Number 2, century labels, they indicate distinctiveness, not exclusivity. So just because a stage is labeled Tafri', it doesn't mean that ta'sil or tadlil wasn't there. Of course, there was a lot of tadlil and a lot of ta'sil. It's just that we don't see them in as much in the books, in the Hanafi works of that era, or at least the works that have reached us. My purpose is to walk you through these genres and first give you a timeline, because we should start out with the development of Hanafi fiqh. Okay, one thing, how many of you have heard this statement that Hanafi fiqh is furu-based and not usul-based?
Yeah, or I've heard something along the lines that the Hanafi usul is in the furu or something like that.
Wonderful. Okay. So I think if you just understand this simple statement and not just understanding it, but actually visualizing it. If you just visualize what we mean by that Hanafi fiqh is furu-based, you will understand everything about Hanafi fiqh, like the key working of Hanafi fiqh. So what we mean when we say that Hanafi fiqh is furu-based? First of all, let me just explain the word furu and usul. Furu means applications or the scenarios where you apply the principles. So principles, usul, and furu applications. I can explain it to you more, but if I just show you this page here, this is Kitab al-Asl by Imam Muhammad Shaybani. Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani, he was the student of Imam Abu Hanifa, and as we know that Imam Abu Hanifa had various students, but the most prominent ones were Imam Muhammad and Imam Abu Yusuf. What makes up, I should have mentioned it here, if you see the genre list, the top is core corpus or usul or Zahir al-Riwaya. Zahir al-Riwaya is a term that was developed and coined by 5th or 6th century scholars, mainly Halwani and Sarakhsi. Before that, it wasn't that common. And why I mentioned usul? Because I didn't want this list to be Hanafi specific. So each school, for example, Maliki school, other schools also have their core corpus, meaning the transmissions that were directly transmitted from their founders. That's what core corpus is. So sometimes, just like during research, we have to differentiate between primary and secondary references. So this is our primary reference when we are deriving rulings in any school, not just Hanafi.
So like for like the Malikis, is that the Muwatta?
Yeah, exactly. But because I am not sure of course, the Muwatta has Silsila Dhahabiyya. They have a very authoritative chain. But I am not sure if, for example, Qarafi's book, it holds the same status. So I'm not aware of other schools. You can always add, as I said, because I'm not good in other madhhab, so you can just share the information about other schools if you know. So I'm just going to focus on Hanafi fiqh because that's what I have been studying. So Zahir al-Riwaya, there are 6 books of Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani. Of course, there is difference of opinion whether 6 or 4 or 7. But generally speaking, 6 books of Imam Muhammad that have been transmitted through authentic chain from Imam Abu Hanifa, and they represent the core text or the primary reference for the Hanafi fiqh. Now that's sorted out because I do have the picture of all 6 books and some of their pages, so you can compare and contrast. But I noticed that there wasn't much difference between one book and another. So I have just selected 2 books here, Asl and Al-Jami' al-Kabir. Both of them are books by Imam Muhammad. So 2 out of 6 most authentic books. So you can see that Al-Asl lil Imam Muhammad ibn Shaybani, it's like 10, 11, 12. 12 volume book. It's one of the most expansive works of, probably the most expansive work of Imam Muhammad. Okay, first of all, in all the books, I have selected the chapter of sales, Kitabul Buyur, for easy comparison. So basically all genres that you see, unless it wasn't applicable, so you can compare each book. Now, we started with furu' and usul. Here is how it looks. Can you see the page clearly?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So this is the primary text of Hanafis. Kitabul Buyu. First of all, you see that he has included salam in the buyu, which is fair, but usually the later scholars don't do it. He begins with a narration of the Prophet ﷺ, right? And then he explains another narration from Imam Abu Hanifa. And then he goes straight into furu', into applications. So basically narration, application. إذا أسلم الرجل في الطعام كيلا معلوما. If somebody has a forward sale in food, فالسلم فاسد, so this sale is invalid. If this happens, then this sale is this or that. If this happens, then. So you can see if, إذا أسلم, إن كان رأس المال, if the advance payment is unknown, if he وإذا اشترط, if he places a condition. So now they are all furu', basically scenarios where you apply this narration. Can you see the asl or the qaida anywhere? For example, if you just read the hadith, it says that gold with gold, same, yadan bi yadan, it has to be on the spot, and any extra is riba. And then he goes on, silver for silver, wheat for wheat, all this and that. This is a very famous hadith. And then here it says, أسلم ما يكال فيما يوزن وأسلم ما يوزن فيما يكال ولا تسلم ما يوزن في. Okay, so here, of course, this is not the hadith. This is actually probably a narration from the Sahabi, but many times we classify it under marasil. Marasil are those where some of the narrators, they have been dropped. So of course it doesn't hold the same importance as the connected ahadith where no narrators, where the chain is completely intact. But again, we have differences of opinions, and Hanafi say that if an authentic scholar, even from the third generation, is saying something, it probably holds more weight than a fully connected hadith because of the so many fabrications that happened after during that time. So anyway, we are going into ulum al-hadith, which is not the point here. The point here that he mentioned two narrations, and here you can see the basis, but Imam Muhammad, he hasn't written a principle anywhere. Of course, it's implied from this view, but it's not mentioned anywhere, like in terms of a very precise and qualified theory. And then he goes straight into applications. And then if you keep reading, the next chapter is al-buyu al-fasida, the invalid sales, invalid contracts. Again, no principle here, no qaida, no asl. Actually, just yesterday, I went into asl because I was so surprised why they haven't mentioned asl or the qaida or the dabit or whatever you call it. It depends on the context. They have similar meanings. So when I went to Shamila and I searched the word asl in Shamila, in this book, in Kitabul Asl, only a very few instances came up, and they didn't mean the asl as the principle. It was like mentioned in another context. So anyway, the point is that Imam Muhammad rahimahullah, he didn't mention in very clear terms the principles on which he was basing his rulings. Again, وَإِذَا اشْتَرَى وَإِذَا اشْتَرَى وَإِذَا اشْتَرَى وَإِذَا اشْتَرَى. If a person buys this, and all of these. So these are all applications. And so no mention of usul anywhere other than these two narrations. Now, if we move on to Al-Jami' al-Kabir, another text from the corpus, from the 6th book corpus. This is the preface that I took. If you just see the highlighted parts here, it says, Can you read it? Can somebody read it? Hamza, can you read this part?
والحق أن هذا الكتاب آية في الإبداع ينطوى على دقة باللغة
بالغة
على دقة بالغة في التفريع على
yeah,
قواعد
okay.
اللغة.
Perfect. Okay, I just wanted to point you to the word tafri' here, because this is the key word that you should look for in any preface. Tafri' is that you are actually coming up with applications. You are not coming up with principles, but actually applications. So you see, Tafri is mentioned here. He's saying this book is very precise in applications. And also in applications or the branching out. For example, Tafri has different connotations. So sometimes it means like applications, like the scenarios where you can apply. And sometimes it also means different variations of the same or one concept. So anyway, basically Ustad Kawthari, he is describing this book and he's saying that this book is very precise in the tafri', and he is not talking in the context of fiqh. He is saying that actually it's so precise in the matters of language and mathematics, usul al-hisab. So you can imagine that if he was that precise in language and mathematics, so what could you tell about his brilliance in the matters of fiqh? So now here is Kitab al-Buyu from Al-Jami' al-Kabir. Now remember, we are reading the same author, Imam Muhammad, but this is another book. Notice how Kitab al-Buyu, this is the main title. Right after this, he jumps into Babul Uyub fil Bay. And shortly, we will contrast it with Quduri, for example. In Quduri, you first have some preliminaries, some basics about the contract, how the contract is concluded, the integrals of contract, and so on and so forth. He doesn't go into any of these. Imam Muhammad, he just goes al-uyub fil bay, the defects in a contract. Again, rajulun ishtara abdan, a person buys a slave, waqabadahu, and takes possession, and whatever. We don't need to go into the details. The point is, he is not mentioning anywhere the usul. But how can you tell that he had sophisticated usul that were debated and discussed within their students? He had a very large circle of students. It's because if you ever read a law book, for example, if you are filing your taxes, for example, and you read IRS instructions, sometimes you see that they have to apply so many qualifications, and even then it leaves room for ambiguity. So those founding fathers, they were so brilliant that they thought the best way to establish their usul is through furu', because there is so much you can describe under a qaida. Because how many qualifications, how many exceptions can you make in 2 sentences? Sometimes it becomes like an essay, because literally anything I say will have some exceptions or some qualifications. So the best way they thought was to present the corpus of fiqh in terms of furu' and not usul. And actually it was a very smart strategy, because as the principles are not mentioned, you cannot counter the principles. You have to basically go into the furu' and then compare and contrast between the different furu', meaning applications. Any questions about that before we move on to another book of, because now we are done with the Zahir al-Riwaya. So you understand how the Zahir al-Riwaya, or basically the core texts, they don't mention usul, but they imply usul through their extensive treatment of furu'. And the key points here, core Hanafi text, it's a furu' bonanza, literally. You just find like furu' just boiling over. And there is minimal, if at all, reasoning or evidences. Sometimes he does mention, but it's very occasional. Any questions about this?
I wonder if part of the reason why there isn't like reasoning or mentioning of like principles is if the purpose of this text itself was just to record the furu' or record the ahkam in and of itself without necessarily providing documentation of like the practice of arriving at that hukum. Do you think that could be the case of why there isn't more reasoning involved?
Yeah, that could be one reason. And actually, because sometimes there are practical reasons as well, just like you mentioned, that they had a large number of students. And sometimes, as the books show, they would take one fara or one scenario and they would dissect it and they would debate and discuss it for hours. And there were many layers of reasoning and many layers of evidences. And then they had to evaluate. So it was the process. It wasn't very realistic for them to record the process. So they just found it easier to mention the conclusion.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So it seems like it's going from like one of these examples of how we shift into principles might be like what we're seeing maybe a move from an oral tradition into a written tradition and like a larger framework.
Exactly, yeah. That's true. Okay, so we move on to another genre. We have covered the core corpus. This is the Kitab al-Kharaj. This will fall under the genre of topic-specific books. So Kharaj means tax, and this is the book that Imam Abu Yusuf, he wrote about the taxation, and he did it at the request of Harun al-Rashid, who was the Amir al-Mu'mineen at that time in the Abbasid period. So let me just confirm this. We are in the 2nd century Hijri. So 2nd and 3rd, it was an era of Tafri'. And when I say Tafri', I don't mean that there were no usul. It's just that the usul were so complex and so multi-layered that they couldn't or they didn't pen it down. And of course, Imam Shafi'i did that. He was younger than Imam Abu Hanifa and like contemporary of Imam Muhammad. So he did lay down his usul. But then, as we will see, as we see in some books, that it created a lot of problems for him also, because many times you cannot follow your usul. So it's just a strategy that Hanafis followed, that they focused on furu' in terms of recording more than usul. But of course, they were basing their furu' on the usul always. So this is another genre, Kitab al-Kharaj. It's a very famous book that he wrote on the fiscal policy. It's not very useful for our purposes, but I just put it here so you can compare it with another genre that I will discuss later. It's the critical editions genre. So that's it. I think that's enough for us, just to give you a visual of the book. Now moving on to the 4th century. This century, we are moving from Tafri' to Tadlil and Ta'sil. Tadlil means showing evidence. Ta'sil means you are showing your usul, basically describing or laying down your usul. So this book is a very interesting book of Imam Tahawi. What he did, he has, this is a preface of this book. Imam Tahawi, it's a very good reason to actually go into the reason for writing the book. So this is his methodology. I just want to go into this because time is flying. يقول الطحاوي في سبب تأليفه. Tahawi is saying why he wrote this book, because he wanted to refute the Ahlul Ilhad, the people of deviation. And this was his primary purpose. And his secondary purpose was to evaluate the evidences of disputed issues. What do we mean by that? Because the Hanafi madhhab was under constant pressure and under constant attack from the people of hadith, who argued that Hanafi madhhab relies more on opinion or qiyas or reasoning, more on qiyas, or emphasizes the importance of qiyas more than the hadith. And of course, this was an accusation that didn't hold true. He had a different science of usul al-hadith. And so Imam Tahawi is rescuing or defending the Hanafi madhab. And how he did so, because he was so good in hadith. So this is another genre. Just first go to the genre. He focused on hadith, number one. I will show you a couple pages from his book, and then I'll ask you where we put this, how we classify his book under. Again, Kitab al-Buyur from Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar. Kitab al-Buyur, this is again the chapter of sales. He goes into bab, he gives a title, unequal barter of barley and wheat. Is it allowed or not? He mentions a hadith, just like Imam Muhammad did, but this time he is not mentioning the hadith that supports your point. He is actually starting off with the opponent's textual evidence, opponent's nas. So this is the opponent's evidence. So he's starting off with that. Then he is Qala Abu Ja'far, yani he is referring to himself. Then he is saying, oh, there are some people who have interpreted this hadith, and based on this hadith, they have said that unequal barter is not allowed. And Shafi'is allow it. Hanafis, they allow it. Now here he builds up his argument. He said, okay, he mentions the evidence of the opponents. Then he mentions the dispute very briefly. He says some people say allowed, some people say not allowed, and other people say allowed. And you see how he doesn't say we. He doesn't mention the word we. He is just saying that other group of scholars. خَالَفَهُمْ فِي ذَلِكَ آخَرُونَ. And as you can see in the Hashia, by akharun, by other scholars, he means himself, Abu Yusuf Muhammad. Basically, in every single instance, he is taking the side of Hanafis. So whenever I say proponents, it means Hanafis. And whenever I say opponents, I mean non-Hanafis. So he mentions the dispute. Really a very interesting book to read just for the Jadl perspective, if you're interested in disputation methodology. But then he offers alternative interpretations that don't result in the same conclusion as the opponents. So basically he's saying, oh, there are multiple interpretations are possible. Now, building up the debate, he says, فَلَمَّا انْتَفَى أَنْ يَكُونَ فِي هَذَا الْحَدِيثِ حُجَّةً لِأَحَدِ الْفَرِيقَيْنِ نَظَرْنَا هَلْ فِي غَيْرِهِ مَا يُنْبِئُنَا عَلَى حُكْمِ ذَلِكَ كَيْفَ هُوَ. Basically, he's saying, okay, so your interpretation is possible, our interpretation is possible. So we are both equal. And this hadith that I mentioned, doesn't support anybody's view. It's like a neutral hadith. We cannot score points based on this hadith. So he's saying, okay, let's move on to the other set of hadith. And then he goes on. He mentions one hadith. Now he is offering proponents textual evidence. Remember, because the original accusation on the Hanafis was that they are not good in hadith. So he is mentioning one hadith after another. Okay, what about this hadith? It doesn't result in the same conclusion as you. It says that it's allowed. Look at this hadith. It says it's allowed. Look at this one. Look at this one. So now he is building up his argument. He mentioned how many? Maybe 6, 7 ahadith. And then once he has listed all the ahadith, he then quotes the non-textual evidence. He says, okay, we have established our stance in terms of the ahadith. Now let's move on to the reasoning. He's basically saying that I am gonna refute your conclusion in both ways. So now he's saying, okay, if it were the case as you said, what about the instances where your conclusion doesn't hold true, basically where your logic fails? So he is now presenting the scenarios where the opponent's logic fails. And then he anticipates and counters, meaning that فَإِنْ قَالَ قَائِلٌ فَالْجَوَابُ لَهُ. If somebody objects to our conclusion and says da 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 da, so the answer is this, and da 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 da. So basically, after citing all the first textual evidences, then non-textual evidences, and then he anticipates any counter arguments, and then he counters them. And in the end, he concludes and says that based on all this, it's established that our opinion is right. And then he says, وَهَذَا قَوْلُ أَبِي حَنِيفَةَ وَأَبِي يُوسُفَ وَمُحَمَّدٍ. And this is the position of our founders of the Hanafi fiqh. And then he closes the chapter, opens another chapter, and the same thing goes on. So if you analyze his methodology, he's basically, I wanted to make arrows, but then it was taking too long. He cites opponents' textual evidence, explains a scholarly split, offers alternative interpretations, and then just for the sake of argument, he said, okay, I understand your point, I concede. Let's move on to our side of the evidence. And then he offers own textual evidence, then non-textual evidence. Then he anticipates any counter arguments, responds to them, and concludes. Now, question time. He came in the 4th century, okay? So this is, we are past the stage of Tafri. Out of these genres, where should we place Imam Tahawi's book, the book that we just read, Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar? Where should we place this book?
Would it be included under Sunan?
Very good, Barakallahu Fiqh. It would be under Sunan. Okay, hadith collection of legal import. Perfect. So we check this box. Let me just check and see if we are missing anything. Okay. Since we have already seen the methodology, let me just skip to the next part. What boxes should we check here? What is his methodology? So let's start. Is he doing the tafri'? Is he mentioning any scenarios? Like when I say tafri', I don't just mean that he is mentioning 1 or 2 scenarios as evidences, multiple scenarios. So is he doing tafri, just like Imam Muhammad were doing? Imagine he was not engaging in any argument. He was just explaining scenarios, hukum, scenarios, hukum. So do you think Imam Tahawi is engaging in tafri'?
No.
Perfect, yeah. No tafri' here. Is he mentioning, did he anywhere he mentioned the usul very clearly? Did he delineate the usul from furu' or anything?
No.
Perfect, very good. No ta'sil here. Is he doing taqrir? Meaning, is he, basically these words are important, and I have mentioned them in Arabic because when you are perusing the prefaces of books, these words you should look out for. And by these words, of course, I don't just mean the masdar, but also like qarrara or assasa or farra'a. Or so anyway, is he establishing madhhab without evidence?
No.
Very good. He's not doing so. Basically, you could say that he's doing the taqrir, but because I have qualified it without evidence, because as I said, these words, they sometimes, it depends on the context. So Imam Quduri, for example, in Mukhtasar Quduri, he is establishing madhhab without evidence. But here Imam Tahawi is giving lots of evidences. He is not just establishing madhhab without evidence. Can we consider it as istidlal or tadlil and also jadl? Can we class it under this?
Yes.
Very good. Yes, we should check this box. Takhrij, applying cases on established principles. Is he doing this? So basically in takhrij, what happens if I ask you that I bought this thing from Amazon, can I legitimately demand refund? Now it's a scenario. Now you go back to the books of usul and then you see which case, basically you are mapping case on established principles. So that's what takhrij is. So is he engaging in takhrij?
No.
No.
Very good. Is he doing tarjīḥ? He's evaluating and weighing, preferring or stronger view among opinions. Usually tarjīḥ, okay, I should maybe add a qualifier here. Tarjīḥ usually means when you are evaluating the opinions from the same madhhab. Okay, because usually from one madhhab, like in Hanafis, there are multiple opinions from the different followers or of the madhhab, and also different transmissions from the same founder sometimes. So tarjīḥ means that you just see which transmission is stronger, which opinion is stronger. Is he engaging any of that?
Not within the madhhab, no.
Yeah, very good. So let me just mention here. Madhhab, okay. Is he doing radd, refuting opponents and defending the madhhab?
Yes.
Very good. And who is he refuting, by the way?
It would be the Ahl al-Hadith.
Yeah,
Or
so
particularly the
basically,
Shafi'is.
yeah. So we cannot say it very clearly. Like sometimes you can fill in the blank. For example, in I'la us-Sunan, it's another Sunan book. It's a very latest contemporary book because it was written in the last century by Zafar Ahmad Uthmani. It's also defending Hanafi madhhab. What differentiates Tahawi, even though he was a sort of like classical scholar compared to Zafar Ahmad, who just came in the last century, the difference was that in I'la us-Sunan, which is the contemporary book, is refuting mostly Ibn Hazm. Like if you had the version, Shamila version, for example, and if you just key in Ibn Hazm, I am pretty sure you will get like 100 hits or something. But here, Imam Tahawi, he is just refuting non-Hanafis in general. So sometimes you are challenging like one particular author, your opponent is one madhhab or one author, or sometimes you are just refuting it against all non-Hanafis. So yes, you could say Ahlul Hadith, but here sometimes he is refuting Malikis, sometimes Shafi'is, and it's very difficult to class his opponents under one category. Okay, so now we read the Tadlil, and I mentioned the Asil here. Why? Because in the same 4th century, another scholar named Imam Karhi, he came and he also established usul. And his usul are actually part of this book. Okay, here is Imam Karhi's usul. And you can see al-usul allati alayha madaru kutubi ashabina min jihat al-imam al-Karhi wa dhakara amthilataha wa nadha'iraha an-Nasafi. And then he goes into usul. So Imam Karhi, he took it upon himself to extract the principles that the founding fathers had left unwritten. And then he extracted those principles, which is a good exercise. But again, in almost every principle, there are so many exceptions that sometimes the asl becomes not as fruitful as you would hope. فَمَا ثَبَتَ بِالْيَقِينِ لَا يَزُولُ بِالشَّكِّ. Again, asl الظاهر يدفع الاستحقاق ولا يوجب الاستحقاق. It's like what should be the default in every situation. And if something is established with certainty, it shouldn't be taken away because of doubt. And then we have asal. It's a very good book. Imam Karhi wrote it in 4th century. And so that's why I have mentioned it in that timeline, that extracting principles from furu, it did happen during that century. It's just that wasn't that common. Moving on to the 5th century, Quduri. It's a favorite book and very popular. It's been read in almost every seminary. Moving on to Mukhtasar Quduri. So what I have done, basically my method of compiling these pictures, that I took a book, its cover, just so you have a visual of it and to retain better. And then I have quoted the Muqaddimah and the table of contents, just to give you some idea. And then pages from Kitab al-Buyur. So moving on to Quduri. Preface, as I said, is the key to unlocking the genre. If you know how to read the preface, you don't have to spend hours. You just have to know the key words that I have mentioned before, and then you just peruse the Muqaddimah. Now, what's the purpose of studying this book now? We want to know how we classify Quduri. So this is the book intro. This is the content structure. It's who is saying it, by the way. We need to know who is saying what. This is the Muqaddimatul Muhaqqiq. It's not the writer. He's the editor. And he's the contemporary Said Baghdash. So he's mentioning his methodology, how he refined the book, how he basically the things that rules that he have used for publishing. He has given a hint about the content volume, how many masail this book contains. And then he's mentioning his critical apparatus, like what kind of editions he found and which edition he has preferred. He has added tambih, kind of a word of caution. He is saying that in Mukhtasar there are masail that are not authentic or not quoted, so they shouldn't be taken as at face value. Anyway, this is not helpful for our genre purpose. This was, but it's still helpful in knowing an overview of the book. I just wanted to Kitab al-Buyu. Okay, can you read the first line, Kitab al-Buyu? Anybody?
بسم الله. البيع ينعقد بالإيجاب والقبول إذا كان بلفظي الماضي وإذا
Perfect. Go ahead.
وإذا أوجب أحد المتعاقدين البيع فالآخر بالخيار إن شاء قبل في المجلس وإن شاء رده.
Very good. Okay. So now you see, compare this with the page that we have read so far. He is now laying the principles, and basically he is laying the basics. So this is what sets this century apart from the previous centuries and this genre. This genre is very simplified. It starts with the basics and then builds upon it. So basically, it's also called, this strategy is called like consensus divergence strategy. So but first he figures out the things that are agreed upon, and then he goes into detail. So وَإِذَا أَوْجَبَ, you could, وَإِذَا أَوْجَبَ أَحَدُ الْمُتَعَاقِدين, if somebody places an offer, the other person has the option to either accept or reject. Even though it looks like a far', but it's not a far'. It's a principle. It's not like rajulun ishtara, a man buys this and da 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 da. He's basically laying a principle here. And then he's another principle here, another principle here, another principle, that if offer and acceptance are concluded, the contract goes through. Then there is no option for anyone, إِلَّا مِنْ عَيْبٍ أَوْ عَدَمِ رُؤْيَةٍ, unless there was a defect or the person didn't see the merchandise. So again, asal, 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 asal. Again, asal, والأعواض المشار إليها لا يحتاج إلى معرفة مقدارها في جواز البيع. As long as you are pointing at something, you don't have to know the exact quantity of it. So now he is basically simplifying it. Now, why is he dumbing down the fiqh so much? Any idea? We shouldn't call it dumbing down, but actually, if you just consider it or compare this with the previous, it's very straightforward, and sometimes you are stating the obvious. Of course, when somebody, like you see, he's saying that when one of the contracting parties places an offer, then the other one has an option. Now, what could be the opposite? Of course, like it's self-explanatory. Like we cannot say that as soon as you put an offer, it becomes binding on the other person. But why he mentioned it? Because he wanted to introduce the concept of majlis, because that's when things get confusing. Some people say, to how long the other person have the option to accept or reject the offer. So that's why he was building up to this point. So anyway, any idea why he was, why the people who wrote these books, first of all, the style is obviously different. He is simplifying it, and he is starting with the basics. And then he goes, you see, there is no furu' here. It's all, he is mentioning the principles, and here he starts going into furu'. Here, وَمَنْ بَاعَ صُبْرَةَ طَعَامٍ كُلَّ قَفِيزٍ بِدِرْهَمٍ جَازَ الْبَيْعُ فِي قَفِيزٍ وَاحِدٍ. If somebody buys a heap of food, and in that heap, he says every unit is for a dirham. And we don't know how many units of, for example, how many kilograms of, how many kilograms are there. So then he says that the contract will be valid only in 1 unit. So now he starts going into furu', but first he established the principle. What do you think could be the reason for this difference in methodology or this kind of a style of writing?
Could it be in terms of the sort of the average fuqaha decreasing? So people can really access the Zahir Riwaya as well as the previous generations to perceive like what the principles he is operating on.
Very good. You are getting very close. Basically, the audience was different. Just like you said that this book was meant to be for laymen because the Islamic Caliphate, it was growing and expanding. And we needed to have a concise manual which every locality, local scholar or jurist could apply. So not everyone had the brilliance to extract principles from these books. And none of them had time to go through and read all these arguments of the previous scholars. So because of the difference in audience and because of the purpose, the purpose behind writing this kind of concise mutun, we call it, is of course pedagogical reasons, because he wanted to convey and he didn't want to confuse the reader, and also because of the context, because the demand was huge and not everyone could dedicate a lot of time to master the concept. So this genre, now you have read the style, it's very distinct from the previous ones that we saw. Now let's see how we place it under which genre. This is the 5th century. There was a proliferation of mutun at that time. Okay, so if you find something in Quduri, even though Quduri is popular, but do you consider it Zahir al-Riwaya?
No?
Yes, it's not Zahir al-Riwaya. I don't want to go deep, but if something is mentioned in both, like, because many times mutun, actually the concise texts, Quduri is a matan, concise texts. It was actually, most of the times, it was based on Zahir al-Riwaya. So the main ingredient of those mutun were Zahir al-Riwaya. And then they added their own things. But the main ingredient was Zahir al-Riwaya. Still, we cannot consider it Zahir al-Riwaya. So this is a straightforward. It came right after usul. Mutun is important. Can we class it under commentary? Like, is he explaining another book?
No.
Yeah, he's not explaining. Is it a poem?
No.
Yeah, so we don't have to go into all of these, but it's not topic specific. It's a very comprehensive book. It's not exactly the art of fatwa issuance, because he's just telling you what you should believe in. It's not exactly giving you the principles of how to evaluate. So basically, it's a very, we cannot class it under Rasm al-Mufti, even though it was used by muftis. Like, not as a tool to learn ifta, but as a tool to actually give rulings, because most of the people, when they asked questions, it was, he actually, mutun, the purpose of mutun was to cite most frequent scenarios that could happen in everyday life and to give their answers so people could read it. Okay, and it's also, there is no usul al-fiqh, because he is just giving you the conclusion. he's not showing his reasoning. Let me just go back. What's the primary objective of the book?
Would it be Taqrir?
Very good. So he is doing Taqrir. Almost most mutuns, they serve the purpose of doing Taqrir. They don't serve the purpose of proving position with evidence. Now, I remember when I read Quduri, I was disappointed because I really wanted to quench my thirst of intellectual reasoning. And then somebody pointed out, oh, if you really want to go into the process of his thought process or the lawmaking process, there is another book of Quduri called Tajreed. And it's a multi-volume, expansive work where he has discussed the different evidences. So it's not that Quduri, Imam Quduri rahimahullah, he didn't have those evidences or he couldn't debate it. It's just this book was not meant to be for that. So the reason and objective of the book was different. Let's wrap up lesson 1 here. Here is a quick recap of what we covered. So we sought to understand the stages of the development of Hanafi fiqh through the oft-repeated statement that Hanafi fiqh is furu-based. So to this end, we explored sample pages from the classical books. We discussed some potential reasons for this approach. One reason could be that principles can make you more vulnerable in debates due to their limitations. Another reason could be that early jurists were not trying to establish a formal madhhab, they were just recording rulings, so their purpose was different. Another potential reason that it wasn't practical to document the extensive and multi-layered reasoning that went into each ruling. We examined sample pages from 3 key genres, Zahir al-Riwaya, through Imam Shaybani's Asl here and Jami'. And we examined Sunan genre through Imam Tahawi's Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar and Mutun genre through Mukhtasar al-Quduri. We discussed each genre's distinct style, methodology deployed by author, and target audience. We traced the evolution of Hanafi fiqh from Tafri' to ikhtisar, from Shaybani's Tafri' to Quduri's ikhtisar. And we also examined juristic methodologies of Tafri' as evident in Shaybani's books, Ta'sil as evident in Karkhi's Risala, Taqrir as evident in Quduri's Mukhtasar, Jadl or at-Āruḍ wa at-Tarjīḥ as evident in Imam Tahawi's book, and ikhtisar again in Mukhtasar al-Quduri. So we examine how these genres differ in style and purpose and structure. So Zahir al-Riwaya more complex, no reasoning, Mutun more structured, starting with foundational concepts and progressing toward more intricate disputes. We saw how Jadl looked like in classical Hanafi texts, and we explored Tahawi's 8-step dispute or refutation methodology, Radd methodology. Finally, just a note regarding the course structure. We had to pivot since genres couldn't be fully understood without knowing the methodology, so we combined both topics in lesson 1. In lesson 2, inshallah, we'll go over the remaining genres along with their methodologies, plus touch upon the scholarly hierarchy of Hanafi jurists. I'll be posting class notes and a practice quiz along with the lesson recording so you can review, test your understanding, and reinforce key concepts, inshallah. Allahumma inni istawda'tuka ma 'allamtani. Oh Allah, I entrust to you what you have taught me. Fardudhu ilayya inda hajati ilay. So please return it to me when I need it. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.